And Heath has Christian McCaffrey and 3 Detroit Lions, Jared Goff, Sam LaPorta, and David Montgomery. And we'll take a look at where they went. McCaffrey was early in the second round. He was the 3rd pick of round 2. Jared Goff was the end of round 9. He was after Jordan Love, another player that was on Heath's Do Not Draft list. I didn't include him for this show. David Montgomery was in round 4. So before a lot of those running backs that we talked about, like James Conner, way before them, 2 rounds before, Aaron Jones, James Conner, J.K. Dobbins, Tyrone Tracy, DeAndre Swift. And then who was the last one? Oh, Sam LaPorta. Sam LaPorta was the 1st pick of round 4. Okay. So Heath, why don't you start with McCaffrey and then we'll tackle the Lions.
Yeah, I mean, McCaffrey was the old running back that none of us were worried about going into last year that turned out to be the one that we should have been worried about. He has multiple lower leg injuries. He's going to be 29 years old, or may have already turned 29, but definitely will be at the start of next season. And I think he's still going to end up being a top 15 pick, most likely. I think you were calling him a great value because he fell into round 2.
That was.
I think he may go in round 1, and I do not want to take that type of chance on a guy that I've not heard any sort of report that he's not going to have tendonitis in his Achilles anymore when he comes back. I think he's probably like the most likely outcome. The thing you should expect is that Christian McCaffrey is not Christian McCaffrey anymore.
Okay, when would you take? Is even a round 2 pick for you?
I round 2, 3 turn to be okay.
Anybody willing to take McCaffrey in round 1 other than me?
I can't do it.
I think as we discussed when we went over the mock draft, like when you get to the back end of round 1 and you're looking at the group that we saw this past draft, I may miss a name or two, but it was Nico Collins, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., all 4 of those receivers, I think were like pick 10 or later. And then it was McCaffrey, Henry. I don't remember there was a 3rd running back in the mix there. If you feel like, okay,
Chan,
I'm okay with one of those receivers as my 2nd pick, and I want to see if McCaffrey has what we hope is left in the tank to be a top 3 caliber player, a number 1 overall player, number 1 running back, then you pull the trigger at that spot just to make sure you get him if you really want him. If not, you let it sort of play out the way Thomas did, which was he took Nico Collins, Thomas Schaefer. He took Nico Collins with the hope of taking another receiver there. McCaffrey felt him, and he kind of took the Robert Turbin theory of, I'm just going to take the best running back who still has the ability to be elite. And it worked out well for Robert because he drafted Saquon and Derrick Henry. Or at least he was high on Saquon and Derrick Henry in the league that we're in. You just have to have a belief that McCaffrey is going to be right. And so, yes, we haven't heard anything that he's not dealing with any issues. We haven't heard anything that he's not, suffered a setback as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, what's the difference between him and Barkley? Barkley a year ago, I mean, Barkley was very injury prone, and had trouble staying healthy. If you're going to say age, it's fine. It might be the only thing, but like Aaron Jones and James Conner, they just had very healthy, productive seasons.
Well, Barkley did play 14 games the year before, and he had played 16 the year before that. He'd had some injuries, but I'm worried that Christian McCaffrey at his age just had these injuries last year, and tendonitis is not something that I think generally just goes away.
This will be one where I want to hear from one of the, but we'll get our medical guy on. All right. And we'll get Rudy on or Marty on, and we'll hear what he has to say. I'd like to hear what all the doctors have to say about McCaffrey, but all right. Heath is out on McCaffrey. Now, Jared Goff, David Montgomery, Sam LaPorta, a trio of Lions, and you are, based on what you expect their cost to be out.
Right. And you said that both LaPorta and Montgomery went in round 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that would be way out for me. I think first off, I am going to be a little bit concerned that a team that was an insane outlier last year in terms of total volume of play and total volume of points scored, and just lost their offensive genius and replaced him with someone who was not like a protege who was just there running the same thing. I think that team might take a big step back offensively. Not that I think the Lions are going to be bad, but there's a big, you could be a good offense and lose a touchdown a game off what they did last year. And the other thing is Sam LaPorta, his rookie year was fantastic and put him in that elite tier of being drafted in round 3 last year because he scored a bunch of touchdowns, not because he had an elite production in terms of efficiency. And then last year, he just didn't have as big of a role in the offense with Jameson Williams there. And now we've got a new coordinator. I don't know how he's going to distribute all of these touches. And I think Jahmyr Gibbs is obviously quite a bit better than David Montgomery, and there's a good chance with a new offensive coordinator they don't split the work up quite as much, especially with Montgomery now another year older.
Yeah. Montgomery, the first 13 games of the season, he got hurt in week 15, the 14th game, left early with an injury. He was a top 12 running back. He was 11th game in full PPR, and he actually had more carries than Jahmyr Gibbs. He had 2 fewer catches than Jahmyr Gibbs. They had almost the same amount of touches. But you think it will be more Gibbsy? Because we're kind of hoping for a more Gibbsy split this year, and it didn't really happen.
I could just be hoping it into existence, but that is what I'm hoping for. And I just think when you have a back as talent, like they're both, I've been a big David Montgomery fan for 4 years. I was arguing for him back when he was in Chicago. I'm not saying he's bad at all. He's not. I think he's better than Jamal Williams, but at 28, when Gibbs is just entering his prime, and a new offensive coordinator, I think it would make sense that you'd see a little bit of the work shift towards Gibbs.
32% of David Montgomery's PPR fantasy point total came from touchdowns. He scored 12 of them last year. He had 1 game with 15 plus PPR and no touchdowns. So if you're drafting David Montgomery, you're hoping that he still has that role of being an inside the 10 all the way up to the goal line touchdown scorer for the Lions. And that's an easy role for him. I could see him succeeding in that role. It's all the other stuff that he does that makes me nervous that he could be marginalized a little bit more, and that accentuates Jahmyr Gibbs a little bit more. I personally don't love what they did at offensive coordinator either. And I kind of smell what Heath's cooking here. And this is the Lions team. It's kind of easy to look at them and say, okay, different brain in charge now. Maybe they do take a step back.
And Goff, if you just think, I think people probably feel like Jared Goff had his best season, right? I mean, I don't know that he can do much better than what he did. He averaged 23 fantasy points per game in 6-point per pass touchdown leagues, 22.9. Dave might have a slightly different number, but around 23 points per game. To put that in perspective, Dak Prescott has averaged more than 24 points per game 4 times. And Goff didn't even do that last year, and Goff threw 37 touchdowns. That's because he ran for 56 yards. So now it's also because he barely threw the ball, right? I mean, he threw 31 times a game, 31.7 pass attempts per game. The previous 2 years, he was 34.5, 35.6. But I don't know. It just feels like I don't know that Goff can do any better. And he was QB 8 per game in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues, QB 7 per game in 4-point. Does anybody kind of feel that way? Like he peaked, he hit his ceiling last year?
Mostly. I mean, but I think also, you started the show with your news and notes saying that they're going to run the offense through him, which is, maybe taking a little bit more off of what David Montgomery per se does and giving a little bit more to what these elite pass catchers could be. I mean, you have first-round talent, Jameson Williams. You have what's proven to be an elite talent in Mara St. Brown. You have what could be an elite talent at tight end in Sam LaPorta. And you still have, which I think is kind of the saving grace to all of this, is that they still have one of the best offensive lines. So, he's going to get a lot of protection. They may be in a lot more shootouts now because if the Vikings offense continues to develop, assuming that J.J. McCarthy is, picking up the mantle from Sam Darnold, which is strange to say, but, keeps that offense afloat. And the Packers take a little bit more step toward what they were in 2023 and get a little bit more explosive. And we have some shootouts there. And obviously the Bears are trending in the right direction. Then we could have a really fun division, depending on how the Lions defense looks, which is clearly what was a problem for them at the end of last season. So I think in terms of what these guys all have to offer, yes, you lose the brain trust, and that's a scary proposition. They're still all relatively young. They're still all relatively in their primes when you factor in the offensive line and Goff. And hopefully it just becomes, a smooth transition. There is clearly cause for concern, but I think if you're overvaluing Jared Goff, you're probably not playing this game the right way because of what you said. I'm like, he's not going to give you some bonus production. He's going to have to be a 40 to 45 touchdown type of guy, which he hasn't done yet. Like you said, it just kind of feels like he peaked. So 35 to 40 touchdowns is probably the best case scenario. Can he become a consistent? How many passing yards does he have this year?
Like 4,600.
Right. So can he take the next step? I don't think so. I think this is kind of like what he
Right.
is. So 4,500 yards, 35 touchdowns. That's a great settle for quarterback. It's not someone that you go out and say I have to go and build my fantasy team around Jared Goff. He's going to win you fantasy championships because 23 points per game with an elite roster is great, but he's not going to be a Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen type of guy. And I don't think he's going to morph into that all of a sudden because of a change in system.
Third lowest ADOT in the NFL, Jared Goff. That was a little bit of a change for him, but also with the third lowest ADOT, he had the second most touchdown passes. Actually, the most touchdown passes of 50 or more yards, which is pretty surprising. But it kind of, you go back and you watch the 50-plus yard touchdown passes, you see the talent, right, of Jameson Williams, mostly Jameson Williams. Actually, fun stat, if you want to look at, go to 30 or more touchdowns of 30 or more yards in just the Jameson Williams plays.
Yeah.
Jameson Williams gave Jared Goff an extra, I think, 2.2 fantasy points per game on his 5 touchdown catches of 30 or more yards. So that's part of the appeal of Goff, is like he's got these playmakers around him, as Jamie was saying. And LaPorta can make big plays for a tight end, and St. Brown can get going too. So
I think just in the case of LaPorta, if you look at what he started to do in the second half of the season, I think it was kind of a little right before Thanksgiving to the end of the year. Like, that was the guy that we were drafting at the start of the season. That was the guy that had his rookie dominant campaign. So can he pick up from that going into year 2? Now, part of that was Montgomery getting hurt. Part of that was, I think, right around the time Jameson Williams had the 2-game suspension too. So factor that into the equation. But I just think if you're taking Sam LaPorta in round 4 in the draft that we did, you're taking him ahead of George Kittle, which was a mistake. Like, those things just don't feel like they should be happening. But if you're getting him round 6 still, I still think he's got top 5 upside.